Pick up any bill in your wallet, a 20, a 10, whatever you've got. As a physical object, it's worth close to nothing. A few cents of paper and ink. You can't eat it, burn it for meaningful warmth, or trade it for materials that build anything. And yet you can hand it to a stranger anywhere in the country and walk away with groceries, gas, or a haircut. That stranger has no personal reason to want a piece of cotton paper with a portrait on it. They accept it because they believe the next person will too. And that person believes the same thing about the person after them. Nobody actually checks. Nobody has to. The belief just holds millions of times a day without anyone stopping to ask why it works. That's fiat money. Currency with no gold behind it, no silver, no physical commodity you could redeem it for. Its value comes from agreement, not substance. And the more you sit with that, the stranger it gets. Because collective agreement sounds like something that should be fragile. Rumors spread, trust breaks. Yet this particular agreement has held for most of the world, for decades, without collapsing. So the real mechanics worth understanding aren't what is fiat money. It's what actually holds that agreement together. And what happens on the rare occasions it doesn't. For most of history, money was tied to something physical. Gold coins had value because gold itself was scarce and desirable. Paper money, when it existed, was often a claim ticket, a promise that you could walk into a bank and trade that paper for a fixed amount of gold, sitting in a vault somewhere. The paper wasn't the money. It was a receipt for the money. That system had a built-in discipline. A government couldn't print unlimited paper currency because every bill in circulation was theoretically a claim on a limited physical stockpile. Print too much, and people would notice there wasn't enough gold to back it all, and the whole system would break. That discipline was also the system's weakness. Gold doesn't expand when an economy needs more currency to function. It doesn't care that a war needs funding, or that a recession needs stimulus, or that a banking crisis needs an emergency lender. The supply of money was chained to the supply of a metal dug out of the ground, regardless of what the economy actually needed in that moment. By the mid-20th century, most major currencies operated under a modified version of this. The US dollar was tied to gold, and other currencies were tied to the dollar. That system finally broke in 1971, when the United States stopped allowing dollars to be redeemed for gold. From that point forward, the dollar wasn't a claim on anything physical. It was just a dollar. Other major currencies followed a similar path. The world moved, almost quietly, into a system where money's value depends entirely on trust rather than metal, which raises the actual question. If there's no gold in the vault, no physical thing your currency is a claim on, what is actually stopping a government from printing endless amounts of it? 3 things, and none of them are physical. The first is legal tender law. Governments require that debts, including taxes, be settled in the national currency. You can't show up at tax time with gold bars or a stack of foreign currency and expect it to count. This creates a floor of demand that has nothing to do with belief or sentiment. It's a legal requirement. Everyone who owes taxes needs the currency, which means everyone who owes taxes has to earn it, hold it, or trade for it. That single requirement manufactures demand for a currency, independent of whether people find it trustworthy. The second is the government's ability to actually enforce that requirement. A tax obligation only creates real demand for a currency if the government can collect what it's owed through courts, through institutions, through the basic functioning of a state. This is part of why currencies issued by unstable or collapsing governments tend to lose value fast. It's not just that people stop trusting the paper. It's that the mechanism forcing demand for it, enforceable taxation, is breaking down at the same time. The third is expectation. Not just I trust this currency today, but I expect this currency to still be useful tomorrow, and everyone I do business with expects the same thing. This is the part that sounds abstract, but is actually doing most of the daily work. Money is valuable because everyone is coordinating around the same expectation, all at once, without ever having to discuss it. You accept a paycheck in dollars because you expect your landlord will accept dollars. Your landlord accepts them because they expect the grocery store will. The grocery store accepts them because they expect their suppliers will. Nobody in that chain is thinking about gold, or government policy, or economic theory. They're just relying on the next link. This is what economists sometimes describe as a coordination problem with a self-fulfilling answer. The currency has value because everyone believes it will keep having value, and that belief is correct precisely because everyone shares it. It's less like a rock sitting on solid ground, and more like a crowd standing on each other's shoulders. Stable as long as nobody looks down and starts wondering if it's stable. That's also exactly where fiat currency becomes vulnerable, in a way gold-backed money never was. Gold-backed money could be inflated or deflated by discovery, a new gold rush, a depleted mine, but it couldn't be destroyed by a change in public sentiment. Fiat money can. If enough people, at the same time, start doubting that a currency will hold value tomorrow, that doubt itself becomes the mechanism of collapse. Not because anything physical changed, because the coordination broke. This has happened before, and the pattern tends to look similar each time. A government, often facing a war, a debt crisis, or a collapsing economy, starts printing significantly more currency than the economy is producing in actual goods and services. At first, prices rise gradually. People notice, and they start spending money faster rather than holding on to it. Because holding cash means watching its value shrink by the week, sometimes by the day. That faster spending increases the velocity of money moving through the economy, which pushes prices up even further. Workers demand wage increases to keep up. Businesses raise prices in anticipation of costs rising again, before they can sell their inventory. The cycle feeds itself. This is what happened in Germany in the early 1920s, when war debts and collapsing production led to a currency that lost value so quickly that people were reportedly paid multiple times a day, spending wages within hours before prices climbed again. It's part of what happened in Zimbabwe in the 2000s, and more recently in Venezuela, where currency devaluation became severe enough that the local currency was functionally abandoned in everyday transactions in favor of US dollars, a foreign currency that at least came with a functioning government and enforceable tax system behind it. In each case, the physical currency didn't change. The paper was the same paper. What broke was the shared expectation that it would still be useful tomorrow. Once enough people stopped believing that, no law and no central bank could force the belief back into existence quickly enough to prevent the collapse, which is the part worth sitting with. Fiat currency isn't inherently unstable. Most fiat currencies, including the dollar, the euro, and the yen, have functioned for decades without anything close to this kind of collapse. But its stability isn't guaranteed by anything physical. It's guaranteed by institutions doing their job well enough for long enough that nobody has a strong reason to doubt tomorrow. That's also precisely the trade-off fiat money made when it broke from gold. A gold-backed system is rigid. It can't expand to meet a crisis. During the Great Depression, countries still tied to gold had a much harder time responding, because expanding the money supply to stimulate the economy meant risking the gold backing behind it. Fiat currency doesn't have that constraint. A central bank can expand or contract the money supply in response to what the economy actually needs. Cutting rates during a recession, injecting liquidity during a banking crisis, tightening supply when inflation runs too hot. That flexibility is a real advantage. It's part of why most modern economies function the way they do, with central banks actively managing currency rather than being locked to a fixed physical anchor. But that same flexibility is the exact thing that makes fiat currency dependent on discipline rather than physics. A central bank that manages currency responsibly can smooth out crises that would have broken a gold-based system. A central bank that loses that discipline, or a government that overrides it to print money for short-term political reasons, can trigger exactly the kind of self-reinforcing collapse described above. The system doesn't have a hard physical ceiling stopping that from happening. It has institutional restraint, and institutional restraint is a human decision, not a law of nature. This is also why the health of a fiat currency tends to track the health of the government issuing it more directly than people usually assume. A currency isn't really backed by gold, and it isn't really backed by the economy in some vague sense either. It's backed by the functioning of the institution that issues it, its ability to tax, its ability to enforce contracts, its track record of not destroying the currency's value for short-term gain, and the reasonable expectation that this will still be true next year. Which is why the dollar, the euro, and other major currencies aren't valuable because of some abstract promise written into their existence. They're valuable because millions of people each morning make an unspoken bet that the systems behind them will still be functioning by evening. Most days, that bet isn't even a conscious decision. It's just how a paycheck gets spent, how a bill gets paid, how a stranger hands over change without a second thought. The $20 bill in your wallet was never actually about paper, or ink, or even the government stamped across it. It's a working piece of a much larger agreement, one made by everyone who accepts it, renewed constantly, without a signature, without a vote, without anyone ever formally agreeing to anything at all. It holds together because, so far, everyone keeps showing up and acting like it will.